The galactic Senate chambers hummed with the low-frequency vibrations of 100 different species conversing in their native tongues. The massive domed structure on Zentha Prime glittered with floating holograms of star systems, each displaying the military might of the Federation's member races. The air smelled of ionized metal and the faint, acrid tang of alien pheromones. Captain Ryan Blake stood at the human delegation's podium, his scarred hands resting lightly on the smooth surface. The old wound across his left cheek itched, a souvenir from the Battle of Tau Ceti, but he ignored it. Around him, the representatives of the Galactic Federation murmured among themselves, their many eyes and sensory organs flicking toward him with barely concealed amusement. High Speaker Vexis of the Zeperian Dominion rose from his floating throne, his elongated limbs unfolding like polished obsidian. His voice dripped with condescension as the universal translators rendered his words into standard. "The matter before us is simple," he said, mandibles clicking. "The great war games are for the strong, for the proven." His compound eyes gleamed as they locked onto Blake, not for fledgling species still learning to walk among the stars. A ripple of laughter spread through the chamber. Councillor Droth, the hulking Vorak warlord, slammed a fist the size of Blake's torso onto his podium. Bio-plating rippled across his shoulders as he growled, "Humans are soft, slow, their ships are toys. Why waste time pretending they could compete?" Blake didn't flinch. He'd expected this. 3 years of diplomatic missions had taught him one thing. The Federation saw humanity as a curiosity at best, a nuisance at worst. The holograms shifted, displaying side-by-side comparisons of human soldiers next to the Federation's elite. A Zeperian warrior, exoskeleton reinforced with nanoweave, stood twice as tall as the human beside him, a Vorak shock trooper, muscles coiled like durasteel cables, made even the most augmented human marine look frail. The images were carefully curated, deliberately humiliating. Vexis spread his upper limbs in a gesture of mock sympathy. Perhaps in another century, humans will be ready to play with real soldiers. More laughter. Blake exhaled slowly, his fingers brushing the data chip in his pocket. He'd carried it since leaving Earth, a final gift from Fleet Command. A slender, amphibious delegate from the Aquan raised a webbed hand. "This is unnecessary. The war games are meant to foster unity, not..." Droth cut her off with a snarl. "Unity is earned, not given." His massive head swiveled toward Blake. "Let them watch, learn their place." The vote was called. It was unanimous. Blake watched the holographic tally flicker above the chamber, green lights for exclusion. Red for inclusion, not a single red. As the chamber erupted in self-congratulatory chatter, Blake finally moved. He tapped the podium's comm interface, and the room's acoustics amplified his voice without him needing to raise it. "Interesting," the murmurs died. Blake tilted his head, studying Vexis. "You're right about one thing, High Speaker. The war games are for the strong." He reached into his pocket and withdrew the data chip, holding it up between two fingers. It caught the light, glinting like a blade. "But you've made one critical mistake." Vexis's antennae twitched. "And what is that, Captain?" Blake smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "You think we needed an invitation?" He turned and walked out, the chamber's silence louder than any insult behind him. The holograms flickered, just for a second, as if something had briefly overridden their systems. A glitch. A shadow. By the time the Senate's tech priests noticed the anomaly, Blake was already gone. The airlock hissed as Captain Ryan Blake stepped onto the USN Atlantica's command deck. The ship's black alloy walls absorbed the dim lighting, giving the bridge a predatory stillness. Officers in midnight, blue uniforms moved between stations, their voices hushed but urgent. At the center of it all stood Admiral Lisa Hayes, her cybernetic eye flickering with data streams as she studied a holographic star map. Blake dropped the Federation's formal decree onto the tactical table. The hollow display rippled as the document unfolded, its golden seals mocking them with alien script. "They voted unanimously," Blake said, his voice tight. We're officially barred from the war games, called us biologically unsuited for modern warfare. A low murmur spread through the bridge crew. Commander Krell, the Atlantica's Tarkian liaison, let out a derisive hiss. His scaled fingers tapped the table, claws leaving faint scratches in the metal. Typical Federation arrogance, they still think in straight lines and honor duels. Hayes didn't look up from the star map. Show me the footage. Blake slotted his data chip into the console. The hologram shifted, displaying the Galactic Senate chambers. High-speaker Vexus's condescending voice filled the room as the Superior waved a dismissive tendril. Humanity lacks the physical resilience for true combat. Their neural structures are too slow for fleet coordination. The camera panned to Councillor Droth, the Vorak warlord, who rumbled laughter through his bio-plated throat. Hayes finally lifted her gaze. The cybernetic lens whirred as it focused on Blake. You didn't argue. No, Blake admitted, because I was busy counting ships. He swiped a hand through the hologram, pulling up a classified schematic. The war games aren't just exercises, they're positioning. The winning species gets control of the Cathera Nebula trade routes we need. Krell's slit pupils narrowed. You're suggesting we crash the party? Not crash, Blake corrected. Rewrite the guest list. He tapped a sequence into the console. The star map dissolved into a playback of Earth's greatest military victories: Waterloo, Midway, the Siege of Mars. They think we're primitive because we don't fight like them. Good. Let's remind them why unpredictability wins wars. Hayes studied the footage. A slow smirk spread across her face. You want to bait them, wuss, Blake said. I want to humiliate them. One ship against their entire fleet. No rules, no protocols. Just us doing what we do best, adapting faster than they can blink. The bridge fell silent. Then Hayes straightened, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Commander Krell, recall all patrol squadrons. I want the Phantom and her sister ships refitted with the new inertial dampeners by Faye. Krell hesitated. Admiral, even with those modifications, the odds are exactly where we want them. Hayes interrupted. She flicked the hologram to a live feed of the War Games arena, 3-star systems pulsing with alien armadas. They'll see one human ship and assume it is a surrender, right up until we break their formations over our knee. Blake crossed his arms. And when the Federation cries foul, Hayes's smile turned feral. We'll thank them for the compliment. After all, they're the ones who taught us how to play dirty. She turned to the tactical officer. Load Project Stormbreaker into the primary silo. Authorization Hayes, Alpha 9. The officer paled but input the codes. A deep thrum resonated through the deck as the Atlantica's most classified weapons system armed itself. Krell exhaled sharply. You've been holding out on me, Admiral. Humanity's been holding out on the galaxy, Hayes corrected. She tapped her comm. Lieutenant Morrison, report to the bridge. We've got a flight plan to burn. Blake watched the star map rotate, the alien fleets moving in perfect, predictable formations. They'll never see it coming. Hayes leaned forward, her reflection warping in the holographic display. Let's remind them why you never bet against humanity. The Atlantica's engines hummed to life, the sound vibrating through the hull like a waking beast. Somewhere in the ship, Jake Morrison whooped as he sprinted for the hangar bay, already imagining the chaos to come. Krell shook his head, but his claws were flexing in anticipation. You humans, he muttered, always with the dramatic exits. Blake grinned. Just wait for the entrance. The countdown to the war games had begun, and humanity wasn't just playing. They were rewriting the rules. The War Games arena stretched across 3-star systems, a glittering battlefield of simulated destruction. Holographic projectors the size of moons painted the void with artificial nebulae and asteroid belts, while drone fleets numbering in the thousands moved in perfect formation. Alien dreadnoughts from a dozen species glided through the void, their weapons systems active but safeties engaged. This was the Federation's greatest military exercise, a display of power, discipline, and rigid doctrine. At the center of it all, Vorak Battlemaster Gorath lounged in his command throne aboard the Dread Talon, his bio-armor clicking as he shifted. The view screen displayed the orderly ballet of warships, each following pre-programmed maneuvers. Pathetic. He rumbled to his second in command. No creativity, no fire. His mandibles twitched in disgust. This is why the humans were banned. They would only disrupt the purity of... An alarm blared. On the far edge of the simulated battlefield, space rippled. A single ship tore into reality, its black hull swallowing the starlight around it. The USN Atlantica. Silence fell across every command deck in the arena. Then laughter, Gorath's claws dug into his armrests. One ship. His voice dripped with disbelief. This is their defiance. On the Atlantica's bridge, Admiral Lisa Hayes watched the alien fleets react. Some vessels powered up weapons, others simply ignored them, returning to their scripted maneuvers. She allowed herself a small, cold smile. Comm status. Open channel, ma'am, replied her comm officer. Hayes leaned forward. Attention, Federation participants. The United Earth Stellar Navy formally requests permission to join your little wargame. The response came from a Zephyrian admiral, his voice laced with amusement. Request denied, human. You lack the proper credentials and the proper numbers. Hayes didn't flinch. Then consider this a crash course. Aboard the Phantom, Lieutenant Jake Morrison cracked his knuckles. His fighter was one of 12 launched from the Atlantica's bays, each painted matte black, each running silent. All right, boys and girls, he said over the squadron channel. Time to show these lizards why humans don't play by the rules. The alien fleets barely registered the human fighters as threats. Their sensors dismissed them. Too small, too few. Standard Federation doctrine dictated capital ship engagements. First, fighters were an afterthought. Morrison grinned as his HUD lit up with targets. Phantom Squadron, break and engage. Remember, chaos is our friend. The human fighters scattered like shrapnel. No formation, no predictable flight paths. They wove through asteroid fields, using the rocks as cover, as weapons. One pilot cut thrusters mid-turn, letting inertia carry them into a blind spot behind a Zephyrian cruiser. On the dread Talon, Gorath's tactical officer stiffened. Battlemaster, our flank. The Zephyrian cruiser erupted in simulated damage markers, its shields flickering out as the human fighter strafed its engines. Gorath snarled. How? Their weapons shouldn't penetrate that armor. Morrison's voice crackled over an open channel as he rolled past a Tarkian destroyer. You guys really need to update your shield harmonics. The arena descended into chaos. Alien commanders shouted orders, trying to adapt, but their formations were built for orderly, predictable warfare. Human fighters darted between capital ships, targeting weak points Federation doctrine had deemed unlikely to be hit. A Vorak battleship swung its massive plasma cannons toward the Phantom, only for Morrison to cut his engines again, letting the shot sail harmlessly past and into the hull of a Zephyrian carrier. Oops, Morrison said. Friendly fire's a bitch, huh? Gorath slammed a fist into his console. Focus fire crushed them. But the human fighters weren't where they were supposed to be. They feigned retreats, lured pursuers into asteroid fields, then doubled back. They used debris as improvised weapons, firing at rocks to send them careening into enemy formations. On the Atlantica's bridge, Hayes watched the tactical display with quiet satisfaction. The alien fleets were in disarray, their perfect formations collapsing under the weight of human unpredictability. Admiral, her tactical officer said, we're being hailed by the Federation Oversight Committee. Hayes nodded. Put them through. The holographic face of High Speaker Vexis appeared, his usually smug expression twisted in outrage. This is an outrage. You're violating every rule of engagement. Hayes raised an eyebrow. You mean the rules you didn't let us read? Vexis sputtered. Your tactics are dishonorable. Behind Hayes, Captain Blake stepped into view. They're human. The transmission cut outside. The Atlantica powered up its main weapons. The alien fleets, now fully aware of their mistake, scrambled to regroup. Morrison's voice crackled over the comms again. Hey, Admiral, They're finally taking us seriously. Hayes allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. Good. Let's show them what serious looks like. The asteroid field between Sigma Draconis and the Wargame's primary staging area should have been empty. The rules of engagement prohibited combat in such hazardous terrain, too unpredictable, too dangerous for the carefully choreographed displays of alien military might, which was exactly why Lieutenant Jake Morrison had led his squadron straight into it. Phantom 1 to all units, Morrison said, his fingers dancing across the controls as his fighter banked hard around a tumbling rock the size of a city block. Remember, they expect us to fight like they do, so we don't. Behind him, 12 human pilots echoed their confirmation. The USN Phantom was the fastest ship in Earth's arsenal, but right now speed wasn't the plan. Superior Flight Commander Zix's voice crackled over the open comm channel, his translator struggling with the tone of disbelief. Human vessels, you are violating the exercise perimeter. Withdraw immediately or be... Morrison cut him off by flipping his ship end over end, plasma rounds from the pursuing Superior fighters streaking past where he'd been a second before. Sorry, Zix, can't hear you over the sound of us winning. The alien squadron, 20 strong, their ships gleaming with polished armor and perfectly aligned formation, banked in unison to pursue. Zix's lead ship fired another volley, the plasma bolts melting a nearby asteroid into slag. Too slow, Morrison muttered, then hit the thrusters. The Phantom shot forward, not away from the asteroids but deeper into the densest part of the field. His squadron followed, their ships weaving through the chaos like birds in a storm. Zix's squadron, trained for open space engagements, hesitated. Their formation broke as individual pilots tried to navigate the sudden obstacle course. One clipped a spinning rock, sending it careening into two others. The resulting collision scattered debris in all directions. Now, Morrison said. The human fighters split apart, each darting in a different direction. The Zepyrians, still trying to re-establish order, didn't see the trap until it was too late. Morrison's wingman, Lieutenant Chen, spun her Phantom backward, firing a single precision shot into the thruster array of a passing asteroid. The rock's trajectory shifted just enough to slam into the lead Zepyrian fighter. The alien ship's shields flared, then failed under the impact. Scratch one, Chen reported. Across the field, the other human pilots were doing the same, using the environment as weapons, luring the aliens into collisions, feigning damage only to flip at the last second and let pursuers smash into debris. Zix's voice returned, this time edged with panic. They're not engaging directly. Another Phantom streaked past his cockpit, so close he could see the human pilot's grin through the canopy. Then the human ship vanished behind another asteroid. Looking for me, Morrison's voice taunted over the comms. Zix's squadron was down to half its original number, their perfect formation in tatters. One by one, their ships fell to the humans' unorthodox tactics, drifting on inertia to conserve fuel, using asteroid shadows to mask their signatures, even launching decoy drones that mimicked engine failures. Regroup, Zix ordered, his voice cracking. Fall back to the Morrison's Phantom dropped from above, its ventral guns locking onto Zix's ship. A single burst of kinetic rounds peppered the Zepyrian's engines, sending him spiraling. Game over, Morrison said. The remaining alien fighters, leaderless and disoriented, tried to flee. The human squadron let them go. Back on the bridge of the Atlantica, Admiral Hayes watched the feed from Morrison's cockpit with a satisfied smirk. Around her, the alien delegates in the observation gallery shifted uncomfortably. High Speaker Vexus's tentacles twitched. This is not how the war games are meant to be conducted. Hayes didn't look away from the screen. No, it is how wars are won. Out in the field, Morrison keyed his comm again. Phantom 1 to Atlantica, first wave handled, ready for phase 2. Blake's voice came through, calm and steady. Copy that, Phantom 1, proceed as planned. Morrison glanced at his squadron's status readouts. All green, he grinned. All right, boys and girls. Let's show them what happens when they call us primitive. The human fighters shot forward, leaving the asteroid field and the stunned remnants of Zix's squadron behind ahead. The main alien fleet waited, unaware of what was coming. Zix's final transmission echoed through the Zephyrian command channels, his voice raw with disbelief. They don't fight by the rules. Morrison would have laughed if he hadn't been busy lining up his next shot. Rules were for people who expected fair fights. Humanity had stopped playing fair a long time ago. The bridge of the Atlantica hummed with restrained energy. Admiral Hayes stood at the tactical display, her cybernetic eye flickering as it processed the battle data streaming in. Captain Blake gripped the edges of the holographic table, his knuckles white. On the screen, the alien armada moved in perfect formation, dozens of sleek Zephyrian cruisers flanked by the hulking Vorak dreadnoughts. Their weapons glowed with charged energy, ready to obliterate any threat. And there, in the center of it all, was the Atlantica alone. All ships report ready, Commander Krell said, his reptilian fingers dancing across the console. But Admiral, we are still outnumbered 30-1. Hayes didn't flinch. Good, let them get comfortable. Across the battlefield, High Speaker Vexis lounged in his command chair aboard the Zen Sovereign, his frilled crest twitching with amusement. Pathetic, he muttered. One human ship against the might of the Federation. This will be over before it begins. Vorak Battlemaster Gorath snarled from his own view screen. I expected more from them. This is an insult. Vexis waved a dismissive hand. Destroy them quickly. The alien fleet surged forward, weapons locking onto the Atlantica. Then the trap sprung. Deploy Stormbreaker, Hayes ordered. Deep in the Atlantica's belly, a missile tube hissed open. The projectile that slid into place didn't look like much, just a sleek black cylinder with a single pulsing light at its tip. But when it launched, space itself seemed to recoil. Lieutenant Morrison's voice crackled over the comms from his fighter. Oh, this is gonna be good. The missile streaked toward the center of the alien formation. The Zephyrians didn't even bother to shoot it down. Fools, Vexis chuckled. What is one missile against? The detonation wasn't loud. There was no sound in space, but the effect, a ripple tore through reality. The gravity disruptor warped space, like a stone dropped into water, bending light, twisting metal. The Zen Sovereign lurched violently, its hull groaning as artificial gravity failed. Across the battlefield, ships listed out of formation, their precise ranks collapsing into chaos. Gorath roared as his dreadnought spun uncontrollably. What in the void was that? On the Atlantica. Blake allowed himself a grim smile. That was the opening move. Then the human fleet arrived, not just one ship, not even a dozen dozens. From behind asteroids, from warp shadows, from the debris fields they'd hidden in, human ships poured into the battle, fighters, cruisers, stealth corvettes, all moving in perfect chaotic sync. Morrison whooped as his Phantom spiraled between two Zephyrian cruisers, dropping mines in his wake. Catch this, boys. The mines detonated, not with explosions, but with electromagnetic pulses. The alien ships shuddered as their systems flickered and died. Zephyrian Flight Commander Zix screamed over the comms as his squadron was picked apart. They're everywhere. They don't fight by the rules. Blake's voice cut through the chaos, broadcast to every alien ship. This is human warfare. Adapt or die. Vexis stared at the holographic display in horror. His perfect formation was gone. Ships drifted, crippled, others burned. The humans moved like ghosts, striking and vanishing before counterattacks could land. One of his officers turned, face pale. High Speaker, their tactics. They're not random, they're calculated. Vexis' frills flattened against his skull. He had seen human history. He had dismissed it as primitive. Now he understood. Humans hadn't been left behind by evolution. They had outpaced it. On the Atlantica, Hayes watched the alien fleet unravel. Commander Krell, status? Krell's slit pupils dilated as he read the reports. Vorak flagship disabled. Zephyrian command vessel dead in the water. Their remaining ships are retreating. Hayes allowed herself a small, satisfied nod. Good, send the recall order to our fighters. Let them see what happens when you underestimate us. Morrison's voice crackled over the comms again, breathless with adrenaline. That's it, we're done. Blake chuckled, for now. But trust me, Lieutenant. They won't forget this lesson. In the Senate chambers, the holograms flickered with the live feed of the battle. The mocking laughter had died. Councillor Droth's massive fists clenched. This cannot be. But it was. And the galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again. The holographic displays in the Senate chambers flickered with the aftermath of the battle. The once pristine formations of the Federation fleet now lay in ruins, their ships drifting helplessly in the void. The room, which had been filled with laughter and condescension just hours before, was now dead silent. High Speaker Vexis stood frozen, his 4 hands gripping the edge of his podium. His usually vibrant purple skin had paled to a sickly grey. His compound eyes twitched as he watched the replay, human fighters weaving through asteroid fields, their movements erratic, unpredictable. The USN Phantom danced between plasma volleys, Lieutenant Morrison's voice crackling over the comms with a cocky, "Missed me, Councillor Droth's bio." Plated fists clenched. His massive frame trembled with barely contained fury. "This is impossible," he growled, his voice like grinding stone. "No species fights like this. No species thinks like this." Commander Krell, the Tarkian ally who had once doubted the humans, now leaned back in his seat, his reptilian lips curled in amusement. "You were saying something about primitive tactics?" The hologram shifted to the final moment, the Atlanticus gravity, disruptor missile detonating at the heart of the enemy formation. Space itself seemed to twist. The shockwave ripping through the flagship of the Zepyrian fleet like paper, the explosion sent debris spiraling outward, colliding with nearby vessels in a chain reaction of destruction. Vexis' mandibles clicked weakly. They sacrificed their own drones as bait. Blake's voice echoed through the chamber, transmitted from the Atlanticus bridge. "This is human warfare. Adapt or die." A murmur spread through the assembled delegates. The Ceruleans, usually so composed, exchanged uneasy glances. The Vorak warlords muttered in their guttural tongue, their pride wounded. Even the normally unflappable Octavian observers had retracted their tentacles in shock. Droth slammed a fist onto the console. This was no accident. They planned this humiliation. Krell chuckled. No, they earned this victory. The hologram replayed the battle again, slower this time. The humans hadn't just broken the rules, they had rewritten them. Their fighters used inertia in ways no alien pilot had considered, drifting into blind spots, using debris as shields. Their capital ship had lured the enemy into a kill zone, feigning weakness before striking with surgical precision. Vex's voice was barely a whisper. They weren't primitive, they were evolving. A new transmission flickered to life. Admiral Hayes' face filled the screen, her cybernetic eye gleaming. The war games were meant to test readiness. Humanity has just demonstrated ours. The silence stretched. Then, one by one, the alien delegates began to react. The Tarkians, long skeptical of human potential, bowed their heads in respect. The Ceruleans, masters of telepathic strategy, pulsed their bioluminescence in acknowledgement. Even the Vorak, prideful to the last, grudgingly conceded. Droth turned to Blake's hologram, his voice low. "You knew this would happen." Blake didn't smile. "We knew you'd underestimate us." The Senate chambers, once a stage for mockery, had become a courtroom of reckoning. The holograms now displayed Earth's military history, centuries of conflict, adaptation, and survival. The humans hadn't just won a battle. They had exposed a truth the galaxy had refused to see. Vexis finally found his voice. "The Federation will reconsider its position." Krell's laughter echoed through the chamber. Too late for that. Outside, the Atlantica loomed over Zenthar Prime, its sleek black hull a silent warning. The war games were over. The real lesson had just begun. The docking bay of Zenthar Prime's orbital platform, had never been so silent. The massive hexagonal doors slid open with a hiss of compressed gas, revealing the sleek black hull of the USN Atlantica. Scorch marks from battle decorated her flanks like war paint. Every alien delegate in the receiving line stood rigid, their appendages twitching with nervous energy. Captain Ryan Blake stepped down the ramp first, his boots ringing against the metal walkway. His uniform was crisp, the medals on his chest catching the artificial light. Behind him, Admiral Lisa Hayes followed, her cybernetic eyes scanning the crowd with cold precision. Lieutenant Jake Morrison brought up the rear, helmet tucked under one arm, a lazy smirk playing on his lips. High Speaker Vexis stood at the front of the delegation, his usually vibrant purple skin now pale. His frills lay flat against his neck, a Zephyrian sign of submission. Councillor Droth, the Vorak warlord, loomed beside him, his bioplated fists clenched so tight the servos whined. "You came uninvited," Vexis said, his voice lacking its usual condescension. Blake didn't stop walking until he was inches from the alien diplomat. "And yet," he said, "here we are." A holographic display flickered to life above them, replaying the battle, human fighters weaving through asteroid fields like ghosts. The Atlantica's gravity disruptor tearing apart the Federation's flagship. The moment the alien armada's perfect formations collapsed into chaos. Morrison whistled. "Damn looks even better the second time." Droth's armored chest heaved. "You cheated." Hayes laughed, a sharp, dangerous sound. "No, we adapted." She tapped a command into her wrist console. The hologram shifted, showing centuries of Earth's conflicts. Ancient warriors ambushing armies 10 times their size. Guerrilla fighters toppling empires. "This is what happens when you corner humans. We don't fight fair. We fight to win." The crowd murmured. A Tarkian admiral, his scales shimmering with reluctant admiration, stepped forward. "Your tactics, they were not in the simulations." "That's because we don't think like you," Blake said. He reached into his pocket and tossed the data chip at Vex's feet. It clattered against the polished floor. Every war, every battle, every desperate last stand. Study it or don't. But next time, he leaned in, his voice dropping to a growl. "Don't underestimate us." Vex's frills trembled. He bent slowly, painfully, and picked up the chip. "The Federation revokes its ban." The words tasted like ash in his mouth. Morrison clapped his hands together. "Great. So when's the next war game? I've got some new ideas." The alien delegates exchanged glances, Droth's fists unclenched. "Perhaps a demonstration first." Hayes smirked. "Smart man." As the humans walked past the silent crowd, Blake paused beside Krell. The reptilian Tarkian was grinning, his forked tongue flicking in amusement. "Told you they'd fold?" Krell said. Blake nodded. "Yeah, but this was just the beginning." Outside the viewing ports, the stars burned cold and distant, and humanity would be ready. Morrison stretched his arms behind his head. "So drinks?" Hayes rolled her eyes. "After you debrief, our paperwork always ruins the fun." Laughter echoed through the docking bay, human laughter, bright and unburdened. The aliens watched, some in awe, some in fear. They'd made a mistake. They wouldn't make it again.